Lewis Atkinson to move the motion.
Thank you, Chair. It's a pleasure to serve with you in the Chair, Mr Twigg. I beg to move that this House has considered e-petition 661407 relating to parental access to children's social media accounts. It's a privilege to have the opportunity to open this important debate as a member of the Petitions Committee. I want to start by paying tribute to the petitioners, and in particular the petition creator, Ellen Roon, who I had the honour of meeting as part of my preparations for this debate and who is in the gallery today. Ellen's son, Jules, died in April 2022, and since then she has been a determined campaigner, not just to get access herself to Jules' social media data to help understand the circumstances of his death, but also to secure a future in which other bereaved parents do not face the situation she has. I welcome that Ellen's MP, the Honourable Member for Cheltenham, is here, and also my honourable friend, the Member for Darlington, who has been working with her on this issue. I look forward in particular to their contributions, which I know will provide further insight and will rightly ensure that Ellen's own words are on the parliamentary record. Since Jules' death in 2022, the law and practice related to social media data has changed in several ways, most notably through the Online Safety Act. These changes were secured in large parts thanks to the efforts of the Bereaved Families for Online Safety Group, other members of which are also here today, and I pay tribute to their work. What I hope will become clear in the course of this debate is that recent changes to the law, the implementation of those changes, and the response of social media companies are not yet sufficient, and that further change is needed to help bereaved parents such as Ellen. This petition attracted 126,000 signatures, and that is a testament to both Ellen's campaigning efforts and the public concern on these issues. Online services such as social media, streaming and messaging are now features of everyday life, including the lives of children. There are undoubtedly positive aspects of age-appropriate online services, giving children opportunities to explore the world, connecting with others who share interests, and extending peer support options. But as the level of public concern recognises, it is beyond doubt there have been significant exposure of many children to online harms, and that the action in response to that has not yet been sufficient or fast enough to meet the challenges.
Would the honourable member give way?
I will.
I'd like to thank the honourable member for giving way. Ellen Room has gone through the unimaginable, and I'm absolutely amazed at her ability to continue fighting for answers for her son Jules. Yeah. Does the honourable member agree with me that social media companies are not in the Wild West of the internet age anymore, and have become an integrated part of our society with certain responsibilities? And does he also agree that one of those responsibilities is ensuring children in Wokingham and across the UK are protected from harmful content?
I do agree that social media companies rightly face regulation, and I will come on to talk a little bit more about, I think, in my comments. There is rightly debate and campaigning in the media and elsewhere, and we've seen some of that over the weekend, about the level of regulation of online content that children may access online, whether that be illegal content or legal but harmful content. While the regulation of content itself is not the focus of the debate today, as a concerned parent, I myself am impatient for online services to take proper responsibility for what our children see. Social media companies must not shy away from their responsibilities to protect children, either because of misguided free speech concerns or indeed out of concerns about their levels of profit. I think it's important context for our debate today to note that the law does not allow online services to collect or store children's personal information if they are under the age of 13. As a result, most popular services require users to be at least 13 years of age before they can be used. but enforcement of that requirement has historically been lax, and the age assurance requirements outlined in the Online Safety Act must be implemented without delay. I know members present will want to touch on various elements of the approaches to social media regulation in their contributions today. But in parallel to the wider debate about content regulation, the petitioners here are clear there are specific issues about parental access that warrant response in their own right from both social media companies and the government. So I do now want to focus my remarks and hopefully this debate on the specific questions regarding parental access. First, the petitions call for parental access to social media when children are alive. I understand the instinct for this call, the instinct to directly monitor what a child is doing online in order to protect them from the harms that I've referred to. However, in the course of preparing for this debate, I've also heard clearly from multiple perspectives, including children's charities such as the NSPCC, that broad, overarching parental rights to children's social media would not be appropriate. And of course, we are talking here about teenagers, given the minimum age of use should be 13. Children, teenagers, do themselves have long-established rights to privacy as set out by the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, and established UK law and practice in a range of areas reflects and recognises that. Such rights are important not just as abstract concepts, but because, as I've heard, as older children explore the world, they do sometimes need a private online space to help them do so. For example, a teenager understanding their own sexuality before they wish to share that with their parents. Sadly, we also know that in some horrible cases, parents are themselves perpetrators of abuse against their children. Establishing a blanket right to access of children's online activity would remove an important safe route for children to seek support and alert others in such cases. I know that the petitioners themselves have reflected on such matters, and while they remain determined to support parents to keep their kids safe online, there is a recognition that establishing an overarching parental right to access the data of living teenagers is unlikely to be the appropriate way forward. Instead, it appears to me that the way for parental oversight of a child's social media use should rather be through strengthening and significantly increasing the uptake of parental controls and other specifically designed arrangements that children and their parents agree to together as part of the sign-up processes for online services. It is clearly the responsibility of online services to implement and expand such measures, and I hope we can see rapid progress in that area as a key part of their work in partnership with parents to improve children's safety online. I want to turn now to the issue of bereaved parents' access to social media data. This is specifically the issue that Ellen has been campaigning for, as she is still not able to access data about Jules' use of online services before his death. I cannot begin to imagine the anguish of what it must be like to lose a child, and even more so, to not be given information that might help you as a parent understand the circumstances of your child's death. We rightly talk about laws, protections and rights, but I do not think we talk enough as a society about the right and indeed the need to grieve a loss, especially one so painful as the loss of a child. As part of my preparation for this debate, I spoke with Slow, a charity that offers bereavement supports for parents following the loss of a child. They emphasised to me the absolute necessity of establishing an understanding of what led to death as part of the grieving process. By being denied data about Jules' online activity before his death, Ellen has been denied the ability to grieve as she wishes. This petition recognises that it cannot be right that a grieving mother is forced to go through years of campaigning and investigation to try and get answers about her son's death. I urge everyone, and especially those working in social media companies, to reflect on the evident injustice of this situation and to commit to finding a way to do the right thing and give Ellen the information and answers she needs. The Online Safety Act of 2023 did make important provisions for Ofcom and coroners to access social media in relevant cases following a child's death, in turn helping bereaved families. It's welcome that the current government's data bill making its way through Parliament strengthens these powers and the requirements for data retention, so the risks of data loss in these cases are reduced. However, these provisions do not have retrospective mechanisms, and they are therefore not sufficient for historic cases such as Jules's, where the coronial process has already concluded. As a result, Ellen is in the situation where she has to try and crowdfund a significant sum of money for legal action to get Jules's inquest rerun, so the coroner could then use the powers now available in law to access Jules's social media data. It cannot be right that this is necessary. Some online services say that without a change in the law, they cannot legally release data to bereaved parents like Ellen. But what has struck me in preparation for this debate is that there is not a consensus on the current legal situation. The online safety and data protection expert John Carr told me that he did not believe GDPR regulations necessarily limited release of children's usage data to bereaved parents. And Snap, the provider of Snapchat, told me that they already do, on a case-by-case basis, disclose usage data to a parent who is the successor to a deceased child. Yet other online services, including some of the most prominent social media services used by young people, including TikTok, seem to take a different interpretation of the law. And they state that data protection legislation prohibits them from releasing any data they hold that would give parents like Ellen the answers they deserve. I find this inconsistency of interpretation from online services at best troubling and at worst suspicious, given the historic behaviours of most social media companies involved in minimising and indeed covering up evidence of the impacts of online harm. I believe it is incumbent on all online services to use their considerable resources to push the existing law as far as they can and find a way to release data to bereaved families. I will.
Thank you, Honourable Member, for giving way. We owe it to our constituents that we work together and leave no stone unturned to understand the trends and drivers which lead our children to take their own lives. Social media companies headquartered overseas have repeatedly demonstrated that they cannot be relied upon to take reasonable action out of goodwill, and therefore I invite the Honourable Member to agree with me that it is up to Parliament to legislate accordingly.
I agree that legislative action has been necessary to regulate this, as the Online Safety Act shows, and indeed there are provisions in the data bill going through on this now. I think the issue in this situation is there are some lack of clarity. Under the existing law, some social media companies are finding a way of seemingly doing the right thing, and others are not. And I'm going to come on to that, if I may, when I mention it in terms of asking a couple of questions of the government. But I would say to social media companies, in the event that they carefully do the right thing on a case-by-case basis, and they face data protection questions from regulators in response, I can assure them, I'm sure, that they will find allies across Parliament in defending their actions. So turning now to the Minister and the Government, I ask this. What scope is there for stating clearly in law that so long as due care is taken on a case-by-case basis, the release of data to bereaved parents is permitted? Could the data bill be amended to include a clarification that would remove once and for all the claim of some companies that they are prohibited from giving parents like Ellen the data and the answers that she deserves? Are there any other steps that she believes could be taken to right this injustice? I look forward to hearing the perspectives of colleagues, Chair, and the Government's response to this important debate. I beg to move.
Question is this House will consider e-petition 661407 relating to children's social media accounts. I call Max Wilkinson.
Thank you, Mr Twigg. It is a pleasure to serve under your chairship, and thank you to the Petitions Committee for enabling this debate today. And thank you to the Honourable Member for Sunderland Central for opening. There is nothing any parent fears more than the loss of a child. Tragically, in 2022, Ellen Room suffered this loss. Her world was shattered when she came home to find her son Jules not breathing. He had taken his own life, aged just 14. While Ellen was dealing with the enormous pain of her loss, she also had questions about what had happened in the days, weeks and months leading to Jules' death. Jules was a happy boy. A video filmed just before his death shows him playing happily with friends. The absence of any hints that he might be inclined to harm himself led Ellen's search to his social media accounts. But in her search for answers, Ellen found herself blocked by a legal system unable to tackle the complexities of social media, and blocked by obstructive social media giants who placed process ahead of compassion. The police had no reason to suspect a crime, so did not see a reason to undertake a full investigation into Jules' social media. The inquest did not require a thorough analysis of Jules' online accounts. None of the social media companies would grant Ellen access to Jules' browsing data, citing regulations. A court order was needed to access his digital data, which required eye-watering legal fees. Ellen sought nothing more than what amounts to access to her deceased child's personal effects. In years gone by, that would have required searching through a child's bedroom, perhaps looking at diaries, notes, letters, toy boxes, stickers, any other clues. But the modern-day equivalent of such a search necessitates access to social media accounts. But because the law has not kept pace with the realities of modern life, that search has not and cannot be completed. This is a cruel and inhumane process to impose on a grieving parent seeking nothing more than answers about what happened before their child took their own life. That's all Ellen wanted. Answers about what caused her son to take his own life. I would ask all of us in the room today, and anyone watching at home, to consider what we would want to happen in the event that we found ourselves in Ellen's shoes. And go further. Think what rights a parent would assume in those circumstances as a matter of natural justice. There is, of course, a much wider debate around online harms. But Ellen is using her experiences and her campaign to bring about positive change in this debate. And she is seeking answers in order that others don't have to in future. Because the case of Jules and Ellen is not the first time social media companies have come up short. The dynamic and fast-moving nature of the internet means that social media companies are able to act before legislators have a chance to catch up. This is a problem that has persisted for many years, but it is notable that they only act when pushed by brave campaigners like Ellen, when they shine a light on what is happening. The Online Safety Act, as we've heard, takes us a step forward. It does improve rights of access. The current legislation, however, means bereaved parents like Ellen are still left to fight bureaucracy. And of course, in Ellen's case, she's seeking retrospective action too. The government should look exactly how it can rectify this urgently and in retrospective cases too. There is, of course, now an acknowledgement that giving parents the right to automatic access to living children's social media accounts may have unintended and undesirable consequences relating to child protection. But if the law and parents are to acknowledge that balance, social media companies must also do their bit to keep children safe online. Safe from predators, safe from inappropriate content, and safe from content that may cause children to harm themselves. Sadly, in recent weeks and months, we have seen social media companies make increasingly vociferous claims that the protection of free speech and freedom of expression online must come above all else. The examples of Elon Musk's bizarre approach to X and Meta's decision to ditch moderation in favour of community notes are instructive about what is happening and what could happen next. But there has also been much discussion of the impact of the TikTok algorithm on children's mental health. There will be other platforms and other examples that will come up in future. We've also seen that democracies have started to act to curtail the power of social media companies. The example of the Australian government's approach is instructive, whether or not those of us in this House agree with the detail. Now, I want to thank the Honourable Member for Darlington for her support for my constituent. That has been valuable, I know, to Ellen over the past few weeks and months. But I will finish by thanking my constituent, Ellen, herself. I must pay tribute to her. She is the person whose petition brings us here today. The heartache and devastation she has endured is unimaginable for the rest of us. But Ellen has turned her grief into something that is positive and could be even more positive for this country and other parents. Having watched her campaign so tirelessly and provided support where I can for these past few months, I'm immensely proud of what she has achieved. And we should all be thankful for what Ellen and other members of the Bereaved Families for Online Safety are doing. They know what we in this room all know, what the government knows, what the legal system knows, what police forces know, and what social media companies know. The system is badly failing children and families. So social media companies must now be placed on notice. Protect children and respect families, or face consequences. Protect children so the Juleses of the present and the future do not meet a tragic and early end. Respect the Ellens of the past, the present and the future, so they can be confident that their children can be safe too.
Lola McAvoy.
Thank you, Secretary.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Twigg. It is every parent's worst nightmare to lose a child. Now imagine losing them and not knowing why they're gone. Ellen Room is Jules's mum. She deserves answers, but unbelievably, she's not allowed access to the data that might provide them, and that is so wrong. This is a petition for Jules's Law to allow for parents in specific circumstances to have access to their child's online data. Jules Sweeney was hugely loved and is greatly missed by his family and community. Jules's Law, in actuality, would present a small amendment of no more than 100 words to the Online Safety Act 2023. This amendment and Jules's Law would appear under Chapter 4 of the Act, Information Powers and Notices, under Section 101. The Act currently outlines the powers a senior coroner has in relation to instructing Ofcom to issue a notice to online platforms to provide data in relation to the death of a child. Section 101 has been amended under the Data Protection and Digital Information Bill in Clause 122 to strengthen the powers that Ofcom has to prevent the deletion of a child's data when the notice has been given and issued to the regulated platforms that they have died. The progress made in this area is testimony to the parents of children who are no longer with us and their incredible strength and work in this area. Thank you to those present and those watching for everything you have done to protect our children. We need to build on this, to allow parents access to this data without the need for a second inquest. A further amendment would allow, in the event of future tragedies of child suicide or unexplained deaths, for Ofcom to be notified as a routine course of action. This is to alleviate the risk of vital answers to parents' inevitable questions being deleted and to mitigate against the reality of making it solely the responsibility of the parents to request the data in those painful early days of grief. The authority should initiate a data notice in the event of a child's death so to protect against those answers being lost. This amendment, while small in word count, would be transformational in the rights and experiences of bereaved families. We in this place would be hard-pressed to find a parent or indeed anyone touched by the darkness of a child's death who would not support these measures. Ellen Room is Jules's mum, and she and I have bonded over our shared belief that there can be a future where our children are safe online, that there must be a future where every child in every corner of our great country is protected from online harm, and we are bonded by the fact that we will continue to shout loud until this becomes a reality. Ellen has asked me to read her statement about her work to get to this point, her story. That is a great privilege, and I will read her statement in its entirety without taking interventions as a mark of respect for her incredible work in this area and for all those she speaks for who have experienced such intolerable pain. The Bereaved Families Group's work has already changed the law, and for that you should be immensely proud. Before I read Ellen's statement, I must pay tribute to her. We all hope that if put in Ellen's position, faced with her reality, we would stand up and fight for change. The hard truth is most people can't. But Ellen Room, Jules's mum, is not most people. She is exceptional. Her grit, tenacity and determination to turn her pain into purpose and progress, to fight for answers for her family, for all those who knew and loved Jules, and for those who have found themselves in the same terrible situation, is truly remarkable. More than this, it is Ellen's warmth, openness and grace that I have been moved by. Ellen Room is Jules's mum, and these are her own words. It only takes one person to make a stand for morality and justice. In this case, that's me. However, I'm supported by thousands and thousands of people across the world who think it is morally wrong that I am not entitled to see my child's social media data, which might provide answers as to why my 14-year-old son chose to end his own life. When I launched the petition, I asked that parents should have the full right to access their child's social media accounts, either whilst they are still alive to protect them, or if they die, as in my case. It hadn't crossed my mind that the parents might be the perpetrators. I now understand that this could be the case and hope that the Online Safety Bill and Ofcom can protect live children online. However, in my case and that of other parents, when the child has died, who are we protecting? The predators on these platforms? Social media companies? Surely I should have the right to look for answers to the cause of death. Jules's young friends struggle to understand why he is no longer here. The ripple effect of his death is felt not only by us as his parents, but also by Jules's friends, teachers, and everyone in his life who was so shocked as to why he ended it. We deserve possible answers, or at least to try for them. I am his parent, and he is a minor. As a child, he consented to terms and conditions that permitted social media companies to control his data online. I'm unaware of any other legal context in which a 13-year-old can authorise a legal document such as terms and conditions. I have always said that I do not know if it was social media that caused my son to end his own life. However, as a parent, I feel I should morally and humanely have the right to that data to give me possible answers, as there was nothing offline which seemed to be an issue to Jules. He was not bullied, he was doing well at school, and he had many friends. There didn't appear to be body issues, and whilst he didn't like his floppy hair or chin, we are unaware of anything else that could be of concern. Yes, he had a cheeky side to him, as do a lot of teenagers, but he was a great kid who loved his parents, and his parents loved him very much. I fight now for the right to possible answers as to why my son is no longer alive. I have always thought this to be an online challenge gone wrong. Many MPs feel that the data bill will solve this issue. It won't help me or other parents who are in the same awful boat as me. The data bill will allow a coroner the right to access this data in future deaths of children, but only if the coroner or the police request it. How do we stop future cases where neither the police nor coroner asked to see this information? This is what happened in Jules's case. As a bereaved parent, I was barely breathing myself after the death of Jules, and I was in no fit state to ask or even think of asking the police or a coroner for this information. This could easily happen again with the new data bill. Also, retrospectively, we cannot obtain this information without applying to the High Court for a second inquest. My lawyer has quoted that it will cost me up to £86,000 to hopefully succeed in the High Court, but that seems so wrong to have to find this level of legal fees, which is beyond the reach of almost all bereaved parents, to start looking into missing online activity and find out what was going on. Also, what a waste of legal professionals and staff involved with the new inquest. I'm just asking for data which I feel should be available to me as his parent. However, I'm not allowed to see it, which is wrong. I hope that this will be a good debate, but please remember that as a member of the Bereaved Families for Online Safety Group, I represent many other families in the same awful situation, and I want to try for answers as to why their precious children are no longer alive. If this had been your child, you would want answers too. I don't want any other family to be in this hideous position, which will forever affect us all, our family, Jules's friends, his teachers, everyone in Jules's life, and their families forever. Those are Ellen's words. Ellen's campaign for justice is rare, and as a new MP, I may be forgiven for my perceived naivety, but to me, Ellen's campaign poses us with a binary choice. There is no grey area. So I ask that the Minister do everything in her power to help those seeking answers now whose cases may not be supported through new measures. It is simply wrong that information that may offer clarity and peace to parents facing a new reality without their child is denied them. It is simply wrong that parents who are living in that unenviable reality now face the colossal emotional and financial burden of a second inquest to discover if the information exists at all. Ellen Room is Jules's mum, a campaigner, a leader and a mother, and Ellen Room is right.
Damien Hines.
Thank you, Mr. Twigg, and it's a pleasure to see you today in the chair. I want to join colleagues in thanking the petitioners and Ellen Room in particular for initiating this petition and bringing this debate here to Westminster Hall. I think we were all deeply affected by hearing the statement as just read out, and you have the sympathies of everybody here on the loss of Jules, aged just 14. We think also of other bereaved families, other campaigners. We've been reminded in the last few days, once again, of Ian Russell and the work that he has done since the tragic death of Molly, and all those who take the most unimaginably awful situation for a parent, for a family, and use it to try and make something better for others and for the future. Mr. Twigg, the government's response to the petition notes that with the Online Safety Act, platforms have to set out the policy for how they will deal with such a tragic situation, but also introduces measures to strengthen coroners' ability to obtain information from platforms via Ofcom, providing a route for parents. And we have to see, I think, how that works in practice and how timely it is. What we mustn't have is a new sort of onerous layer that is put on top of parents at the very most difficult time imaginable as they are grieving. There is also, of course, the question, as has been raised a couple of times, about historic cases. And there will also be future historic cases, because not in every case will the inquest have covered this question. And I hope the Minister will be able to say a word about this, that perhaps the data bill is the opportunity to put this beyond doubt, that the parent has an absolute right, ultimately, with the right safeguards, of course, and verifications, but has an absolute right to see the information related to their child. Mr. Twigg, I wanted also to turn more broadly from these most tragic of cases to all families and all children. And I start with the most important thing, which obviously is that trust and support and love within families are the most effective. And most of the time, it's irrelevant what the law is, because within families, we set our own rules. And generally, it's clear that even if our rules are at times a pain for our children, generally they are generally well-intentioned. We must also note, of course, that not quite all families are loving families. Some parents are abusive, and children must always have ways, confidentially, to seek help from child protection services, from the police, from the health service, and from bona fide charities, and that applies at any age. It's also true that everyone needs a degree of privacy, but there have always been different degrees of privacy, and how private something should be proportionate to the level of risk involved. And in accessing online services, Mr. Twigg, we are talking about some things which can have very serious consequences. We need to be able to protect our children from harm, from bullying, from unwanted contact, including from adults, from being drawn to dangerous interests which can become dangerous obsessions. We also, by the way, have a responsibility, and we should be held responsible for them not perpetrating harms on others. And while we trust our children, we do also know that children do sometimes get into trouble. They can also come under pressure from others, severe coercion in some cases. And of course, they potentially have ready access to material of all sorts of varieties, much more harmful than we could as children. They can go deeper and deeper down rabbit holes. And parents aren't the only ones who can help children, but parents do have a unique position in children's lives, are uniquely placed to be able to help and support our children. And that is why I do agree, in principle, with the petitioner, that parents should have a right to see what their child is subjected to or what their child is doing for so long as they are a child and we, as the parent, are responsible for them. And that means at least till age 16. Now, there is a separate debate to be had about the extent of that and what is the threshold and what is the process. And I understand entirely what the honourable gentleman was saying. I don't think anybody probably is proposing to have constant ongoing monitoring. But there are cases, there are instances, there are situations that a child could find themselves in, which I believe do warrant that access being available. There is also a problem, or a hurdle, if you like, with the principle. You can only request access to something that you know exists. It's common for children to have multiple social media accounts on a single platform. But it's probably got a different name these days. It used to be called Finster and Rinster, where you have a fake account and a real account. And of course, the one that your mum sees is one. It's not necessarily, ironically, the one that was called fake was the one where your real life was actually happening. And of course, you could be on lots of other platforms too that parents and others don't necessarily know about. So I believe it's of paramount importance, and I agree here with the honourable gentleman from the Petitions Committee who opened it, to be able to put some guardrails around what children can access. And that is, of course, one of the reasons we have parental controls. So at the heart, Mr. Twigger, what I wanted to talk about this morning was about how those parental controls work and the limits of them. I want to read out just a short note that came from Microsoft. You know, not a company that normally people worry about, a very responsible operator, to a constituent. And this is coming up to the constituent's child's 13th birthday. Congratulations on Fred's birthday. At this age, certain laws allow them to have more control and choices over their account settings. This means that they'll be able to change a number of family safety settings, even if you have already set them up. Fred will also need to allow you to continue receiving data about their activities to guide their digital journey. They can turn off your ability to see their activity on Windows, Xbox and Android devices. They can turn off your ability to see their devices and check on updates, safety settings like firewall and antivirus. They can stop sharing their location through their mobile phone. And that's a child approaching their 13th birthday. So it leads me to question, what are these certain laws that are being cited? And I can only assume it's the It's the Data Protection Bill that went through Parliament in 2017-18. That was the bill that set out that a child aged 13 years or older could consent to his or her personal data being processed by providers of information society services. And the genesis of that, of course, was European law. And Parliament was debating on it and voting on it in parallel with, but before actually completing, exit from the European Union. Now, the age 13 is not universal. EU law specified a range between 13 and 16, and multiple countries did select 13, but not all. France has the age of 15, with some limited non-contractual consents for data processing allowed between 13 and 15. Germany and the Netherlands have the age 16. But the big question, actually it is quite a big question, what is the appropriate age? The other question, though, is what does that age actually mean? And I'm fairly sure, Mr. Twigg, that although this was before the Online Safety Bill, which became the Online Safety Act, but we were already concerned in this House about online safety. And I'm fairly sure that it was not Parliament's intent to reduce parental oversight. And in particular, saying that a child saying that a service can have a child sign up to its service at age 13, I do not think is the same as saying that the parent can't stop them. Still less, it's not the same as saying that the parent should at least be able to know what their child is signed up to. Now, in setting out why the age 13 was set, the explanatory notes to that bill said, it was quite rightly, it was in line with the minimum age of what popular services like Facebook and WhatsApp and Instagram set. But then it goes on to say, slightly unrelatedly, as the example it gives, that this age would mean that children aged 13 and above would not need to seek consent from a guardian when accessing, for example, services which provide educational websites and research resources to complete their homework. Well, I think that sentence might have a lot to answer for, because, of course, it sounds very sensible. You wouldn't want children to be having to get over hurdles to finish their homework. But if you think about it, you don't need to sign up to research something on the internet for your homework anyway, and educational websites are generally exempt from consent requirements. But the big question is, what else might it imply? What else might it allow? Or, crucially, what else might it be being interpreted to allow? And to repeat, I don't believe that it was Parliament's intent effectively to disable parental safety controls for 13, 14 and 15-year-olds. Now, there's a whole other question about those safety controls themselves and how they work, how difficult for a parent, even all of us, who we tend to think we're quite good at this sort of thing, how difficult it can be to keep on top of them, particularly if you have multiple children, different operating systems and multiple platforms. And there really should be a single industry standard entry system that can cover all of screen time and basic entry-level approvals with a default safety on version of the different platforms. And there are related questions again about, we talk about age thresholds and age limits. There's a whole other set of questions about how those apply and how we make age assurance or age verification actually work properly. Those are both debates for another day. For today, my ask of the Minister is simply this. Is it the government's understanding of the legislation that exists that children under 16 should be able to switch off parental controls? And if not, what could be done to clarify the situation? And is a change needed in primary legislation?
Thank you, Mr. Twigg. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship. I'd also like to thank all those who have signed today's petition for raising this issue, and my heart goes out to George's family, and I thank them for their work to bring change so this doesn't happen to other people in the future. I was recently at an event in Worcester's fantastic local library, joined by local leaders, to hear the views of young people in Worcestershire's Youth Cabinet. They presented their manifesto for young people, and I remember being struck by their insights, passion, and in particular their deep concerns over the impact of the online world on their mental health. I share their concern that online harms have run away from us. And we live in a world where young people and old are exposed to content and interfaces that are harmful. I would like to see us move at pace to regulate not only extreme harms online, but also persistent low-level harms that are eroding young people's mental health. Having recently met with Ofcom, I'm concerned that there is much more to do in the regulation of harmful online media. While I welcome us taking some first steps in this area, our current position leaves us far behind where we need to be. If I were to liken our regulation of online harms to the regulation of drugs, then we're currently in a situation where a local newsagent is required to assess the risk that they are supplying Class A drugs, while alcohol, cigarettes and over-the-counter medicines remain an unregulated free-for-all. Let me be clear, these are historic shortcomings under previous governments, but nonetheless, we have much work to do to address the risks of online bullying, harassment and addiction. In my own constituency, I've heard first-hand the stories from men struggling with addiction to pornography and the damaging effects this has had on their relationships and their personal well-being. We need to be open-eyed about the impact of the new online world on adults and young people alike, and it's the duty of government to empower people to stay safe. What the young people in Worcester told me, though, is they not only want online sources to be regulated and to be equipped themselves for this world, but what they want most is for their parents to be empowered to advise, guide and journey with them through the digital world. I agree with them that most parents are currently very poorly supported, and I welcome the enthusiasm I sense from our leaders on this side of the House for family hubs, which offer a community-led, empowering vehicle for this work. So would the Minister agree with me that we should be equipping parents and carers to navigate these hazards with their children, so that instead of feeling isolated, anxious and alone, young people feel supported, understood and empowered?
Voted Caroline Voderden.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm very grateful to be able to speak in this debate today, prompted by Ellen Room's petition, although I have to say I'm extremely sorry that any of us need to be here today at all. And I would just like to pay tribute to Ellen and all the other families in the Bereaved Families Network for their tireless campaigning. A week before Christmas, I sat in a committee room upstairs in this building along with Ellen and senior representatives from all the major tech firms, including Meta, TikTok, YouTube and Snap. One conversation that morning will stay with me for a very long time, a conversation that I can only describe as harrowing, shocking and deeply depressing. Sitting alongside two other heartbroken parents who have also lost their children because of online harms, Ellen confronted the representatives of TikTok and Instagram, pleading with them to release information that could potentially give her some peace of mind following the death of her beloved son, Jules. There can be nothing worse for a parent than losing a child, but to lose a child and not understand how or why must compound that agony. Ellen doesn't know why Jules died. Unlike many other children and young people, he wasn't being bullied online and didn't seem to have any mental health issues. All Ellen wants is to find out what her son was looking at online before he died. It might shed some light on this tragedy, which has clearly caused immeasurable grief. Listening to the pathetic excuses that morning from the tech firms about why they couldn't or wouldn't release the data Ellen is asking for was infuriating. There is no good reason not to release this data. Jules is no longer with us, so claiming data protection seems to me, frankly, rather pointless. TikTok said they would be fined for releasing the data. My question is, by whom? Who is going to press charges against a global tech company for supporting the request of a bereaved mother? Who in their right mind would think that a court case on this point would help anyone? As we've heard already by the member for Sunderland, some social media companies have behaved differently in cases like this. But it is quite clear why some won't agree to release this data. It's a pathetic attempt to avoid the potential bad publicity that will follow if it becomes clear that Jules's short life ended after taking part in a social media challenge, which is one possibility. It's about protecting their reputation. I believe it's about the accountants who fear the lawsuits. In short, Mr. Chair, I would suggest that it's about money. The absence of humanity, of care, of compassion in that room before Christmas was palpable, and I applaud Ellen for having the courage to come back here today. Mr. Twigg, I can see absolutely no reason why tech companies cannot immediately release the data these devastated parents are asking for, and I fully support Ellen and all other parents in their attempts to get Jules's law put on the statute books. In the meantime, I would plead with Instagram and TikTok to not wait for a legal challenge, just release the data. Find your inner human and do something decent. Imagine if it was your child. Under UK law, we do have clear legal processes for handling physical estates after death, and it is high time that we established clear protocols for digital estates which are left behind. The law must catch up with the world we're living in, particularly the digital estates left by young people. Current provisions such as Facebook's legacy contact feature are not sufficient because they rely on a child making a decision while they're still alive, often without fully understanding the implications, as has been mentioned before. It's also quite possible that if children were asked whether their parents could have full access to all their digital online life in the event of their death, they would quite possibly say no. Without formal legal access arrangements, parents are left with no way of viewing their children's account. Absolutely.
Thank the Honourable Lady for giving way. I was reading up on this specific issue in preparation for this debate, and I came across some amendments and proposals to the data bill that outlined that these huge providers and tech companies would be required to have a complaints procedure where parents could appeal for their better nature and the release of the data, and then if they were refused it, there would be a proper complaints procedure. Do you think that goes far enough?
I thank the Honourable Member for her intervention. No, I don't believe it does go far enough. I think it should be a legal right to access this data without any having to go through any complaints process, particularly at a time when one is struggling anyway with the worst bereavement imaginable. This petition seeks to address that gap in law and ensure that in the tragic event of a child's death, parents have the right to access their child's account to gain closure, to preserve memories as well, and to ensure that harmful content is removed. So I do support the addition of Jules's law into the online safety bill, and I would also urge the government to do whatever it can to apply it retrospectively to those who have campaigned on this issue. Mr. Chair, what Ellen's family has been through is the absolute worst imaginable, but tens of thousands of families up and down the country are struggling with the impact of social media on their children and teenagers, addicted to their screens because of the wicked algorithms that lure them in, cowed by bullies who can intimidate them right into their own bedrooms late at night, struggling with body image because they don't look like the influencers they watch, depressed at their lives because they don't resemble the doctored, airbrushed Instagram image of perfection, brainwashed by influencers who spew toxic messages through their pages. The damaging impact of social media on our children is vast. Medical professionals from all disciplines tell us regularly of the harm children are experiencing from hour after hour spent glued to a screen. Their physical health is damaged, their mental health even more so. Even their ability to communicate and socialise with other humans is changing.
Would my honourable friend agree?
I will agree.
Would my honourable friend agree that it is not only the mental health harm, but also the inattention? I speak to so many head teachers in my constituency who tell me that children are unable to concentrate anymore because of hours spent on their screen. And would she agree with me that the government study announced in November seeking to explore this further could be published soon, because every day and every year we leave it, more children are at harm?
I couldn't agree more, and I think what's becoming really obvious is the impact of children on their phones late at night is impacting their sleep. So even that is having a knock-on impact on how well they can operate. So just to conclude, parents across my constituency of South Devon are desperate to protect their children, but overwhelmed by the digital world and the power it has over young people. Parents need legislation to empower and support them. The NSPCC reports that over 60% of young people have encountered online bullying. These are staggering numbers that highlight the need for more robust protections from us for children in the digital space. It's clear that we need more robust protection, and it's incumbent on us as lawmakers to protect children as we do from other harms like tobacco and alcohol. It may be right that parents should not have access to their teenagers' social media because of privacy reasons and to protect children's ability to seek support online. But I believe that this makes it even more important and urgent that social media companies are required and obliged to take responsibility for watertight age verification, and that we should seriously look at raising the age of access to some social media platforms to 16. I urge the government to work with social media companies and other stakeholders to create a clear and respectful framework that allows parents access to their child's social media accounts after a death with no questions asked. This is not about data protection. This is about ensuring families can concentrate on grieving and healing rather than going into battle against the world's tech giants. It's abominable that any bereaved parent should have to do what Ellen and other campaigners are doing. And I urge the Minister to legislate so that this doesn't happen again. And I would like to commend the Petitions Committee for bringing this to the House and the member for Sunderland for proposing the petition. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Twigg. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. And may I pay tribute to Ellen Room's steadfast campaign in the most awful, unimaginable circumstances, those of all other bereaved parents who seek change so that no other parent has to suffer like they are. As citizens, parents and legislators, we are rightfully worried about what our children consume online. The recent Channel 4 programme, Swiped, demonstrated both the addiction our children have and the concerns parents have about the time they spend online and the harms they continue to face. Before they are even able to properly comprehend it, our children are sucked into the online world by algorithms that are designed to get them hooked. And like a drug, they keep coming back for more. In this world, they are taught to look up to influencers with unhealthy opinions, unrealistic beauty standards, and conspicuous wealth beyond their dreams. They're told they're not good enough. They may be cyberbullied by their peers for not being good enough, and they have trouble sleeping. Their attention spans wither, and we know that short-sightedness is becoming more prevalent. Our children's work suffers, and they find it increasingly difficult to read and learn. Our children see pornography online before they receive high-quality sex and relationships education in school. They're shown adverts for apps that will use AI to allow them to nudify their peers and spread such images around their friends in school. And they're criminalised for doing so, though the tools they use remain legal and readily accessible. They get trapped in the whirlpool of online pornography, dragged into increasingly extreme and violent content. They become desensitised, and their perceptions and expectations of sex and healthy relationships are warped. Online behaviours quickly become offline behaviours. Self-harm, dangerous viral challenges, peer-on-peer sexual abuse, and huge harm to mental health, so that 1 in 5 children now have a diagnosable mental health disorder. A generation of children chronically online and harmed by it bears the brunt of a technology that was never designed with children's development in focus and acts with no regard for the consequences of the harm it causes. In questioning tech companies recently, none of them could confirm that they develop products widely consumed by children with input from child development experts. I do not understand why we expect stringent standards in all other aspects of our children's lives. Their toys, their cots, their bikes, our cars, and yet not the impact of social media products. We cannot stand idly by in the name of freedom because there is no freedom in addiction and there is no freedom in being harmed. We cannot let our children's lives be dominated by the dangerous online world. Whether it's depression or misogyny, eating disorders or myopia, we are failing children by continuing to subject them and those they interact with to the impacts of a childhood spent online. I believe we need to reclaim childhood for the real world. And while I recognise the important role that online access plays in providing spaces for children to access support, I do wonder how we weigh up the harms caused through that access to social media, which support services, mostly in the voluntary and community sector, and our public services need to mop up afterwards. I think we need to look more at whether we could provide that access more safely within school settings or youth services. I'm very, very aware of the huge impact that abusive parents and carers may play. But I do believe it might be time for us to start asking whether we're using this as an excuse rather than thinking about how we ensure our children are able to get the access they may need to get safe without also succumbing to the dangers of the online world. We fundamentally need to change the role the internet plays in growing up, and this has to be a societal shift given the pressure children and young people feel to be online. That is why I back Ellen Room's call for parental oversight. Parents deserve to have all the tools available to them to help them protect their children. And that is why I'm also proud to be one of the co-sponsors of the Safer Phones Bill, brought forward by my honourable friend, the member for Whitehaven and Workington. However, much of the onus is on parental control. But as the honourable member for East Hampshire has eloquently outlined, there is potentially no control from the age of 13. And even with controls, who sets what is the right developmental level for access to some apps and social media when there is no expert child development involved? App stores, for example, determine age themselves. There have been a number of examples where app stores have actually lowered the limit of the age on apps that developers themselves say should be over 18, but instead app stores have set the age to 17 or 16. There is access but no scrutiny. We have no way of understanding, unlike films or other things that our children consume, that we know has had that independent, child-led, expert oversight. We need to raise the age of internet adulthood and ensure that Ofcom properly implements age verification for pornographic content as part of the Online Safety Act this summer. And we need to remain open to the need for a new online safety bill to fill the gaps left in the current legislation, as recently argued by Ian Russell, Molly Russell's father. And I also support the calls today for bereaved parents to be given retrospective access to their children's social media accounts. With children's safety and the future of our society on the line, the time for action is now. Thank you.
I've already intervened.
Okay. So I had you down to speak, that's fine. It's Alex McIntyre.
Thank you, Mr. Twigg. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship today. First, I'd like to say thank you to my honourable friend, the member for Sunderland Central, for putting forward this important debate on behalf of the Petitions Committee today. He made some very powerful points in his speech, and I look forward to hearing the Minister's response to those. I may also associate myself with the remarks made by my honourable friend, the member for Darlington, who spoke so eloquently, and also my honourable neighbour, the member for Cheltenham. Mr. Speaker, apologies, I've given you promotion, Mr. Twigg. Mr. Twigg, it's only right to start my remarks proper by paying tribute to Ellen and all of the families for online, who bereaved families for online safety who are here today who've raised this petition, in particular following the heartbreaking loss of your son Jules. It is an unbelievably courageous thing to do, to turn away from the abyss of pain and grief and to turn that into something where you're campaigning for good. And it's quite frankly inspirational to many members in this House. Yeah. I'd also like to thank the 1,711 Gloucester constituents who've signed the petition today. As a relatively new parent myself, I now know what it's like to really worry about a child. People say you don't quite know what it's like to be a parent until your child is born, and I kind of laughed that off and thought, of course you could know, but you don't truly. That moment when you meet your child for the first time and your world changes, you realise that you would literally walk through walls for your child. Thankfully, my child is only one. He doesn't have any social media channels yet that I'm aware of. And if that could continue for as long as possible, I would be really, really grateful. But I know that parents are increasingly worried about their children's use of social media, particularly across the country and also in my constituency of Gloucester. And according to the Children's Commissioner, 2/3 of parents are really concerned about the content their children can access online and the impact that it's having on their mental health. And these concerns are not only felt amongst parents but also children themselves. Research shows that nearly 3/4 of teenagers have encountered potential harms online, while 3 in 5 secondary school-aged children have been contacted online in ways that have made them feel uncomfortable. And as social media is becoming increasingly embedded in our children's lives, it's clear that urgent action is needed. And while the Online Safety Act was a long-awaited start to protecting children online, we must go further. I was pleased to hear my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State, say he was open-minded on introducing new legislation and would encourage him to consider introducing Jules law. Now, today my remarks don't particularly focus on online content, although my honourable friend, the member for Lowestoft, outlined some of the, quite frankly, dangerous and horrific online content that children and young people are exposed to. Members of this House don't need to be reminded of the horrific online content that is available. Myself, not long after being elected, found that pictures of myself and my baby had been posted online with a threatening message anonymously, just for as part of an online spotted page. Now, members of this House develop a relatively thick skin in this job, but quite frankly, imagine that kind of impact when you were a teenager. And I think back to my teenage days, and whether I was mentally equipped to be able to deal with cases of bullying. And I'm just about young enough to remember when Facebook came in. I was about a teenager when Facebook started, and back then it was a much different place. And the, quite frankly, cesspit sometimes of online content that we're seeing nowadays, I don't think I would have had the mental capacity at those teenage years to be able to deal with that level of abuse. I will give way on that point.
I thank my honourable neighbour from Gloucester, and he makes an interesting point. Now, my school years are long behind me, but I can still remember, I mean, we look back at our youths with rose-tinted glasses sometimes, but being at school as a youth can feel like being in a war zone. There's so much pressure. And if you are being bullied consistently, I can barely imagine what it must be like to try and escape that at home, and then to have this device in front of you with all of that material consistently coming in, but even at night. And I would invite my honourable friend to agree.
He's entirely correct that bullying in the days before social media was confined to the school gates, and when you got home, in most cases, sadly not all, but when you got home, that was a place of safety and a haven to be able to recover and steel yourself for the next day. And that has been removed by social media, and people are able to get you wherever you are. And I look back on my days as a teenager, you know, growing up with social media as it was first coming out, Bebo, which I don't think exists anymore, MSN Messenger, and my parents had no oversight over what I was accessing, who I was talking to. Quite frankly, you know, it was dangerous. And that's not to question my parents' parenting skills. They are of an age where they're still learning how to use Facebook in 2025. But we do need to do more to make sure that we are protecting teenagers at such a vulnerable age when they're learning about themselves and learning how to deal and build that mental resilience to be able to deal with some of the stuff that, as I said, some of the members of this House will experience on a regular basis. But while we may have another debate on online content, we all know the reason why we're here and speaking on this petition today. And it really concerns me that grieving parents aren't able to access information about the death of their children that may relate to the death of their children. We know that there's been a worrying rise in dangerous pranks, trends that are going around on social media, a worrying rise in people using social media to groom and to target young people, and that there's really dangerous information going viral. Information that, quite frankly, may have played a role in tragic and heartbreaking deaths up and down the country. Giving grieving parents the right to find answers for themselves must be within our power as a government. And I would encourage the Minister to do what we can to support parents and families in this absolutely heartbreaking position. And thank you very much for the time today.
Thank you, Chair, and it's a pleasure to serve under you today. I'd like to start by thanking the member for Sunderland Central. I'm sure all the constituents in Edinburgh South West who signed the petition will be grateful for the time he invested in crafting his introductory speech. I'd also, like others, pay tribute to Ellen Room. I think she's shown herself to be a fantastic campaigner, and I'm sure her family is proud of her. The situation she finds herself in, however, is absolutely shameful, and I think the member for South Devon is right to question the motives of the social media companies. Absolutely. And also ask who would oppose them doing the right thing. Hopefully we'll hear from them sooner rather than later on this issue. We have to accept, however, that the framework within which these companies are operating was set either by action or inaction within this building. So we have a duty to fix that. My children are all adults now, at least in theory, and I hope they're not listening. But when they're younger, it is, in all aspects of life, but particularly online, it is always a difficult balance to get right between respecting their privacy and also ensuring that they're safe. But we have to accept that internet is a dangerous place. All of us are concerned about material online relating to eating disorders, self-harm and even suicide. All of us are concerned about that and have a duty to do more about it. I have to remind ourselves. The member for Leeds East, before Christmas time, secured, he's not in his place today, had an adjournment debate on the role of internet service providers in blocking the most harmful of content which had been linked to deaths of vulnerable young people. I went along to a adjournment debate that night just to learn more about the subject, but I was utterly ashamed and frustrated at what's happening, how we have companies that seem to be looking for reasons not to do the right thing rather than find a way to support vulnerable people right across our country. So I really do hope, just winding up, I really do hope that the Minister can support as much as possible what Ellen Room and her campaign is asking for. But I think all of us, including the Minister, I think we have to go beyond that. It's not just about the law, it's also about creating a culture online for our young people, where service providers and social media companies feel that they have a social responsibility to support the most vulnerable people in our society and do all they can to support them. Yeah. Thank you, Chair.
It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. Can I also begin by paying tribute to Ellen Room in the most genuine and heartfelt way, what you have achieved and what you do and the pain that you have been through is utterly unimaginable, and I think that what we can do today, and I hope in the Minister's response will make some of that bravery that you've had to endure worthwhile. I'm going to focus my brief remarks on the Online Safety Act, because I believe that our hopes as parents, as campaigners, as elected representatives, so much of our hopes were pinned on that Act, and it is a step forward, but I believe that it is only a step forward, a first step forward, and that more should be done. The Act was a product of a weak Conservative government, with many ministers and backbenchers at the time who shared the opposition's conviction that strong regulation of social media companies was essential, being held to ransom by extreme libertarians who dressed up their ability to monetise hatred and extreme content as a free speech issue. Government ministers at the time gave in to an alliance of social media companies not willing to dilute profits to spend on effective moderation, who had a financial and political interest in driving engagement with extreme content. It was a deplorable outcome, and as many of my honourable members said at the time, plainly the new government, as a first task, has to make that legislation work as best it can, and I understand why my honourable and right honourable friends are pressing on with implementing the Act as best they can, but my request to them is to heed to the petition, but also to recognise that what was good enough for the former government under those circumstances cannot be good enough for this new government in the medium term and the long term, and it's certainly not good enough for our children. The immediate concern for myself, for people on the school gates that I speak to, and many of my honourable friends, is that the proposed regulatory regime is going to let some of the most dangerous and extreme sites escape proper regulation that the vast majority of this people in the country would expect to see. It cannot be right that we let some sites escape accountability for their failure to speedily remove certain promotional material simply because they are small. Of course they're small. Such content is so vile that the chances of the promoters getting bigger audiences is always going to be limited. But the need for the firmest regulation in these cases is driven by content and not by size. There is a course. Yes.
On that point, the failure of Ofcom to regulate the small but risky platforms seems to mean that a site like LinkedIn is being regulated to a greater extent than places like Telegram or Discord, which are overrun with far-right activism, self-harm, misinformation, homophobia and anti-Semitic content. So does she agree with me that this needs to be rectified and that Ofcom needs to raise its game?
The honourable member for his intervention. I do believe more needs to be done, and I don't believe that the government have ruled it out. They're collecting evidence, and I believe that in future iterations of the codes, that should that argument be accepted by Ofcom, that they will make the appropriate changes. I think it's up to us to continue to submit that evidence and to make to call for those changes to be made. The main point of the debate, I think, at the moment is the balance between regulation and innovation, and where we kind of draw the line between the obligation between site users and content providers as not to encourage new services and investment. But it's my belief that that's not the issue at debate that we're debating here today. What we're calling for, what the petition includes, aren't hatred or other data access, aren't drivers of economic growth, and nor is the inclusion of high harm sites in Category 1 a barrier to investment plans for the frontline market leaders. So it's about doing what I believe is the right thing, and I hope that all the voices will be heard today.
Thank you, Mr Twigg. It's a real pleasure to serve today under your chairship and debate such a powerful and moving topic. I want to start, as I think more or less everyone has in this room today, by paying thanks to Ellen for her tireless campaigning work on this. I cannot come close to comprehending the pain that the death of George must have caused you, even before it was exacerbated and extended by the lack of closure that you saw when social media companies refused to give you access to data that could help explain what happened to him. And we, collectively as a society, showed ourselves to be impotent in our ability to compel them to do so. Your ability to turn that pain, turn that love, into such a powerful petition, into such a powerful call for action that I know has motivated so many parents in my Hitchin constituency who signed up to it too, is a true inspiration to so many of us in the room. And just as we're inspired by you, we are inspired by so many of the families here with you today, as part of the Bereaved Family Support Group, who've been doing so much important campaign work on this issue. It's pretty clear, I think, to all of us who've spoken today, that for far too long we've tolerated the belief that online harm is too tricky, too practically infeasible to regulate, in the same way that we would regulate every other form of harm that a young person could be exposed to, often in contexts that historically we've been more comfortable with as legislators getting involved in. That cannot be a state of affairs we tolerate carrying on for any longer. And while there's been some steps forward that are to be welcomed, and I'll touch on shortly, I think your petition highlights several areas where it's clear we need to consider going further to ensure that we are all living up to that duty to do everything we can to protect young people right across society. Both as a teacher and as a former children's social lead, I've got to see firsthand some of the very real ways in which young people can be exposed to harm by our failure to act on social media and online harm over the last decade. And heartbreakingly, as an MP now, I'm always struck by the fact that whenever I do an assembly, even in a lower school or a primary school, almost without fail, there will be a young person, often several, who raise their hand and talk to me about an example where they have been made to feel unsafe or at risk online, and ask me about what I, as their MP, are going to do about it. And I know that urgency to act, is felt by so many of my colleagues across party boundaries, both in this hall today and right across the House. Now, the petition really focuses on some particular aspects where we could do more, about making sure that parents have got the right ability to provide oversight for children on social media and access to really important data after bereavement. Now, since the petition, I know there has been some important progress from the Online Safety Act to give some powers to coroners, to Ofcom, to make sure that in certain circumstances they can support parents' ability to access this data. But as other colleagues have pointed out, I think there are clear areas where it doesn't go far enough. As my honourable friend, the member for Sunderland Central, set out, it's pretty clear that at the moment some ambiguity in the legal position is being used as an excuse by social media companies to not act. We shouldn't tolerate that. We should do all we can, hopefully, as a government to clarify that. But collectively, we shouldn't be letting social media companies off the hook for not doing everything in their power to give you access to the data where no right-minded individual gives you any reason not to, and no right-minded individual or agency is likely to seek recourse against them for doing so. So many members, I think, have quite rightly pointed out the fact that this feels like an excuse, not a reason, to fail to disclose data for you, and we shouldn't tolerate that excuse from companies that we come into contact with in our work as your representatives. Alongside that, as you rightly point out, though, it's important that we don't just look at this through the context of the existing legislation. We know, too, that there's very real risks after bereavement that the data could be deleted. And as my honourable friend, the member for Darlington, pointed out, thinking about ways that we can compel earlier notification to Ofcom and earlier notification to social media companies and online platforms that can have that data, to remove that risk at source, surely has to be a common sense way of making sure that that risk to getting justice, that risk to getting closure, can be closed off. Moreover, the petitioner and many others, I think, quite rightly point out and ask us to reflect on the fact that if we're really interested in child safeguarding and keeping young people safe, it simply can't be the case that it's only after a tragedy and after bereavement that that opportunity for parental oversight and involvement takes place. Now, the Honourable Member for Sunderland Central has quite rightly, I think, set out some of the very real justified concerns that children's charities and advocates have about unfettered and complete access. But as many other members have set out, that shouldn't be the case, and it shouldn't be beyond us to reason and to think through how, in exactly the same way that parents provide oversight over every other aspect of a young person's life, we think about the best and the most sensible ways for them to do so on this platform too. And as Honourable Member for East Hampshire pointed out, I think quite rightly thinking about the age at which young people can meaningfully and rightfully consent in a way that opts them out of that parental oversight, I think has to be part of that process. As well as that, I think it would be fair to say that a fair few of us have our concerns that, as currently envisaged and as currently talked to by Ofcom in some of their recent publications, the implementation of the Online Safety Act may fall short of doing justice to the importances of the issues it's looking at, whether it's considering what more we can do to protect young people from imagery and content relating to suicide and self-harm on social media, whether it's making sure that we don't tolerate technical infeasibility as an excuse for tech companies not acting on some of the most egregious forms of harm, or whether it is that well-intentioned and I think important conversation about that right age of consent that many members have alluded to in their speeches today. There is clearly a lot more we can collectively be doing. Oh, absolutely.
Would the Honourable Member go further and say that Ofcom's implementation so far have been weak, overly cautious and fundamentally disappointing? And would he also concur that it is unfair to put parents in such an intolerable, pressured situation to be the policeman for their children's social media activity?
Well, I think there are some aspects of how Ofcom said they take this forward that are to be welcomed. I would absolutely agree with, I think, the underlying sentiment of her comment, which is, as currently set out, it does not go anywhere near far enough. And as representatives of our communities, as representatives of families who want to do everything possible to keep young people safe from online harm, it is all of our responsibilities to make sure we are holding Ofcom accountable for being far more ambitious and fulsome of its considerations of how it could most creatively and robustly deploy the powers we're giving it to keep young people safe. I sense an intervention is coming.
Will the Honourable Member give way? I thank the Honourable Member for giving way and for his impressive and articulate outline of the debate so far. Will the Honourable Member join me in my calls to Ofcom to strengthen the upcoming Children's Code and to use this opportunity that they have in the fact that the upcoming Children's Codes are not yet published to include functionality, a stronger dynamic risk assessment, which will be a live document that's constantly updated, and include the measures that my honourable friend has laid out in the smaller and riskier platforms?
I concur wholeheartedly. She's been a tireless campaigner on this issue, both in the debate today, but throughout the time I've known her. A very short time in this House, but a very impressive time nonetheless. And I think, as she rightly points out, the Children's Code is a real opportunity, I think, to do right by the intentions of this legislation and by the, I think, collective ambition that we're all talking to today. And from her to the Children's Commissioner, campaigners on this issue are pretty united, I think, in the opportunity a more ambitious code could deliver for safeguarding young people. I'll draw my remarks to a close by just, I think, remarking, as I did at the start, by the fact that for far too long we have allowed young people to be exposed to a level of harm online that we would not tolerate in any other form of life. It is understandable, potentially, but not excusable, that as legislators we are more comfortable sometimes restricting and acting in areas where we've got more direct lived experience, be that, as we've seen from some of the Safeguarding Children's Wellbeing Bill or the Tobacco and Vapes Bill. They're tangible things that we're comfortable and used to voting on, used to making laws on. Online harm can sometimes feel a bit more nebulous, a bit tougher. But that is no excuse not to act. And that failure to act is written across the tragedies experienced by so many families across the country and so many campaigners in the room today. We must do better, and as a Parliament, we have to make sure this is a Parliament where we do.
Jessica Doe.
Thank you, Mr. Trigg. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. I also want to start by paying tribute to Ellen and all the families for your tireless campaigning and for bringing this petition to the House. 119 people in my constituency of Bournemouth West signed. And like the Honourable Member for Worcester, I wanted to take the opportunity to talk about the broader harms of social media and smartphone use that students and parents have brought to me. And I think it's particularly salient in the context of announcements this week about the removal of independent fact-checking from Meta and other platforms. Last week, I visited Bourne Academy, a secondary school in my constituency, which is taking part in the Dorset Boys Club's Impact Hub project. And this project aims to champion the experiences of young boys who are at the face of inequalities and provide a platform for their voices. And the boys raised a range of issues with me, from knife crime to the desire for safe spaces and legal spaces to practice graffiti art. But the thing I found most interesting was that we got into a long conversation about the impact of social media in their lives and its uses in their socialising. And frankly, I was shocked by some of the things that they told me about the content that they're pushed on these platforms. In particular, they mentioned Reddit and Instagram as particularly vile examples of distressing content, that as soon as they log on to these platforms, they're pushed things like videos of people being decapitated and other forms of serious violence. They also mentioned that Snapchat was as a platform where group chats are regularly used to conduct cyberbullying, spread rumours with very, very little accountability because all of the messages disappear within 24 hours. So clearly what we have isn't working to protect young people as it stands. They also reported that age restrictions are incredibly easy to get around, whatever the age restriction. So it's worth noting that Bourne Academy has a no phones policy. Kids aren't even allowed to use them during the breaks, which actually caused some consternation amongst the young people. But it's clear that smartphones and social media are changing the way that young people are interacting and socialising. It can expose them to high volumes of violent, inappropriate, harmful content with very, very little oversight, which many of us in the room will not be used to from our lives. And it's linked to well-being and self-esteem issues, which can have a direct impact on behaviours and the views that young people hold, and in some cases linked to significant increases in young people reporting anxiety, depression, self-harm and suicidal ideation. So if I can, I would be grateful if the Minister could outline what further steps this government is taking to protect young people from harmful content and also to prevent young people from circumventing age restrictions. I know we've discussed potentially raising them here, but I think that is a really key bit as well. I've also heard and been contacted by a number of parents about this issue. There is growing support for a smartphone-free childhood movement within Bournemouth, and I know across the country as well. One parent of a 5-year-old daughter was in touch with me and shared some very misogynistic content that he came across and expressed worries about her being so easy to access this content. And other schools in my constituency have also spoken very specifically about the impact that it's having on school behaviour, this misogynistic content they're seeing, and the extra effort they're having to take to try to address it without the toolkits that they need to be able to do that. But it's not just about content. As the Honourable Member for Lowestoft mentioned, these platforms produce very compulsive and addictive behaviours. Another parent who's an active member of the smartphone-free childhood movement, a father of 2, raised these addictive design features with me, from pull to refresh, gamification, photo scrolling, push notifications. And he has a lot to say on it, because he was somebody who has designed them himself for smartphones and social media and has a real concern about how they're impacting both children and adults. So can I ask the Minister if in her assessment of online safety also includes an assessment of the impacts of these addictive and compulsive features and what steps the department is taking to address them? There are actually quite a variety of views amongst parents that I've spoken to about what the answer is here. Some want a ban on smartphones for under 16, some want an Australia-style under 16 ban on social media, some would prefer a school-led approach, but largely many are simply worried about how to push back on the social pressure that they're getting from very young children to have smartphones and to have access to social media. So I'd be grateful if the Minister could outline what steps her department is taking to engage young people, parents and schools about the best way to find an appropriate solution to the issue. As we've heard from many of the honourable members in the room, technological change often goes faster than we can deal with, and that we can't keep up with it. We have the ability to regulate, it's a bit too slow. So I want to commend the ministers and the government for their work on this, but I would encourage them to take heed of the things that we've heard in the room today and support efforts by parents and teachers to help young people grapple with these real challenges and ensure that the measures that we do introduce reflect the need to protect and safeguard young people sufficiently. Thank you.
Yeah.
Patrick Hurley. Megan. In which case, Munira Wilson.
Thank you very much, Sir Desmond. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship this evening, and I'm delighted to contribute to this extremely important debate today, and thank the Honourable Member for Sunderland Central for setting out in such a well-informed and balanced way the issues that we are considering. May I, with your permission, Chair, take this opportunity to address Ellen Room directly, to pay tribute to your great courage and bravery. I'm a mother of 2 young children. I can't begin to imagine what you've been through. And to start this petition and push this campaign forward in the way that you have is I did ask your permission, sir, but if I may, to just address the...
No, all remarks are addressed to the Chair.
All right. I just want to pay tribute to Ellen.
Do it to the Chair.
Okay, so I've done so again now. Thank you, Sir Desmond. I just wanted to pay tribute to Ellen for her campaign. I also wanted to say how cross I am that actually Ellen is having to push this campaign to get access to Jules's data online. For those of us who were here in this last Parliament during the passage of the Online Safety Bill, as was now Online Safety Act, a number of us attended a meeting organised by Baroness Kidron in the other place, who brought together Ian Russell and some of the lawyers that supported him in Molly's case. And they talked very powerfully about the battles they had to go through to access this data. And Baroness Kidron led a really strong campaign to change the law. But sadly, that still hasn't happened, which is why we are here today. The use of social media accounts is now prolific across society, and even more so for young people. The Online Nation report from 2023 highlighted that children aged 8 to 10 spent an average of 2 hours, 23 minutes per day online, and that rose gradually to an average of 4 hours, 35 minutes online daily. That's the equivalent of 66 24-hour days online per year for 15 to 17-year-olds, and that's just an average. We all know that actually there are a number of young people who spend far more time than that online. The digital age has transformed the way we live, communicate and interact. And social media, in particular, has become an integral part of our daily lives, especially for our children. And while these platforms offer numerous benefits, they also pose significant risks. As Liberal Democrats, we advocate a balanced approach that respects the privacy of our young people while ensuring their safety and well-being. Now, the Honourable Member for East, or I should say Right Honourable Member for East Hampshire, touched on this point, that actually nearly 6 in 10 8 to 17-year-olds with profiles on social media, video sharing platforms or messaging platforms have said that they use more than one profile on any particular social media app or site. And when asked why this was, that's because just under a quarter of them said it was because one account was just for parents and families to see, while a similar proportion said one account was for close friends and one was for everyone else. And meanwhile, 13% of 8 to 17-year-olds who had more than one profile said one account was for the real me and another contained edited, filtered posts or photos. I think those statistics tell us an awful lot. But children themselves are concerned, as we've heard many honourable members outline today, that many children are concerned about their time online. An Ofcom report last year showed that young adults were less likely than older people to think they had a good balance between their online and offline lives. And another Ofcom survey showed that children's concern about their time online increases with age. And indeed, the Children's Commissioner did a brilliant report, the Big Ambition survey last year, where she spoke to over 367,000 children. And amongst, as a result of that survey, we found out that actually staying safe online was a huge issue and a huge priority for many young people. And what we must remember in this place is actually Young people want to be consulted and they want to be involved in the discussion and they want to be involved in the solutions. It's not just about us telling them what is right. It's not about the tech companies telling them what is right. It's about involving young people in the solutions. And that's why I think the work of such as the ongoing inquiry into youth violence and social media by the Youth Parliament is so important. So I urge young people across the country to participate in the inquiry by sharing their own experiences on social media and keenly await the publication of the inquiry's findings. Now, behind each of the statistics that I've cited today are young people, their peers and their families. And having heard from some of those parents and young people in my constituency, and I thank the 465 people in Twickenham who signed this petition. And speaking, as I say, as the mother of 2 young children myself, I have a 6-year-old and a 10-year-old, and the 10-year-old is desperately begging her parents every single day for a smartphone. Some of her friends have their own YouTube channel already, and we are trying to delay as long as we can, hopefully sometime into her secondary schooling, before we give her a phone. I know as a parent, and I know from hearing from other parents and young people in my constituency, that we as legislators have a responsibility to act. And you know, I'm afraid it was after many years of delay that the last Conservative government did bring forward the Online Safety Bill, now Act. And we as Liberal Democrats welcomed a number of the measures in those Act and the regulations as an important step forward. And we support the swift implementation of it. Empowering coroners to obtain information from online services about a deceased child's online activity was a significant step in the right direction. But as we've heard so powerfully today, there is a very, very strong case to be made for parents to be able to access children's data after the child is deceased. And that measure should be made and that provision should be made retrospective as well. And as others have pointed out, I think the data bill provides an ideal opportunity to certainly explore such a change and how it could work. However, this is often too late, and too many young people's lives have been tragically lost already. So we can't afford to delay before we take some sort of action. And I think there is much more we can do to protect our children and young people online, and by putting more guardrails, as others have described them, in place. Social media companies must do more to enforce their existing minimum age requirements using the latest age verification technology. They must do more to create age-appropriate digital environments and have increased transparency in their data practices. Ofcom should do more to use the full powers of the Online Safety Act, including at the harms caused by functionality and design of social media, as well as their content. A meeting with organisations such as the Internet Watch Foundation, Five Rights and the Molly Rose Foundation, it's clear that we must not just push for strong regulation, but safety by design. We must recognise that children and teenagers are particularly vulnerable to the dangers of the online world. Cyberbullying, exposure to harmful content and online predators are just a few of the threats they face. And both the government and the social media companies must do much more to protect children from harmful content and activity online. And I'd like to hear what the government is doing to work with Ofcom to ensure children are protected during that transition period. However, we must also be mindful of the importance of privacy and trust. There are good reasons why parents can't access children's data while they are alive, and this is an important safeguard, and we've heard about some of the important reasons for that. Adolescence is a time of exploration, of self-discovery, and young people do need space to express themselves freely. However, that safeguard relies on children being kept safe online, and this is patently not the case currently. So Ofcom and social media companies do need to do much more on that front. And any measures we implement must strike a delicate balance between safeguarding our children and respecting their rights to privacy. Education, Sir Desmond, is also crucial to achieving this balance. Schools need to teach children about online dangers and how to use the internet and social media safely and responsibly. Parents must also be empowered, and I say this, as I say, as a parent myself who feels like I'm way behind my younger children. We must be empowered to protect our children online, including through digital literacy education, advice and support on best practice. And, dare I say it, it's not necessarily a politically expedient thing to say, but we parents also have a lot of responsibility in terms of how much time we allow our children to spend online and what devices we give them access to. And it's hard when our children face so much peer pressure, but we need to take responsibility too. The Education Select Committee report last year, Screen Time Impacts on Education and Wellbeing, also called for education, and as well as a cross-government holistic approach. It said that government should work across departments, including the Department for Health and Social Care, the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology, the Department for Education and the Home Office to produce guidance for parents on how best to manage and understand the impact of screen time on their children. So I look forward to hearing what the Minister has to say on that point. But that's why we Liberal Democrats have also calling on the government to create an independent children's online safety advocate, as called for by the NSPCC, who would act like a consumer watchdog to promote and protect children's interests. We must ensure that proper safeguards are in place and that children are not just protected from online harms, but empowered to exercise their digital rights. This petition on parental access to children's social media accounts highlights a critical issue, Sir Desmond, that demands our attention. As we navigate the complexities of the digital age, we must prioritise the safety and well-being of our children. By implementing thoughtful, balanced measures, we can protect our young people from the dangers of the online world while respecting their right to privacy. Let us move forward with compassion, determination, and a commitment to creating a safer digital future for our children. Thank you, and with apologies, Sir Desmond.
It is a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, Sir Desmond, and I thank the Honourable Member for Sunderland Central for bringing this debate. I would like to start by thanking Ellen Room for her determined work in fighting to highlight this issue. Her courage and her stoicism in pursuing this cause has been hugely impressive, and Parliament would not be debating this today were it not for her impassioned commitment. This e-petition has garnered some 126,000 signatures in support of calls to give parents and guardians the right to access social media accounts for their children. And we've heard many important contributions from members this afternoon, and I'm sure that parents across their constituencies will be grateful for them to doing so. Honourable members for Cheltenham and for Darlington, who paid tribute to Ellen Room and has shared her own words. Honourable members for Sunderland Central and South Devon spoke about the refusal of social media companies to release data citing legal restrictions. The honourable members for Worcester and for Lowestoft spoke of the impact of harmful content on children's development. And my right honourable friend, the member for East Hampshire, spoke about how current legislation gives control to children as young as 13. With the vast majority of children now having access to a phone or a tablet by the age of 12, children are exposed to an enormous range of content online. Many children are being exposed to social media content which is inappropriate, dangerous, and poses substantial risks to safety and development. There has been a growing crisis in children's mental health, with recent research highlighting that 32% of 8 to 17-year-olds state that they have viewed something worrying or upsetting online content in the last 12 months. Yet only 20% of parents of children and teenagers in this age group report their child telling them they had seen something online that scared or upset them during the same time frame. Evidence has shown that the widening of access to the internet has seen more children moving away from social interactions, with a subsequent detrimental impact on mental health and social development. We welcome much of the work that this government is doing in relation to protections for children by building on the foundations laid by the previous government. But could I ask the Minister what is being done to increase mental health support for children? In January last year, the Labour Party pledged to introduce specialist mental health support for children and young people in every school, as well as open access children and young people's mental health hubs in every community as part of the Child Health Action Plan. And though I appreciate it's not part of her brief, could the Minister outline what progress the government is making towards delivery of these pledges as they relate to this topic more broadly? Keeping children safe online in the current media landscape is a challenge that will require agile and adroit legislation that simultaneously keeps pace with technological developments, but also reflects cultural usage of media platforms. We also need to recognise the power that social media giants now hold, and ensuring accountability will be a key aspect of any legislation. We must ensure that parents have the right to be able to ensure that their children are safe from harm on platforms, whilst also ensuring that, especially in circumstances where children may be being mistreated. I've previously heard Ellen describe how social media companies have abdicated responsibility in assisting in the disclosure of messages that could help to identify how a tragedy has occurred. In the case of Jules' room, TikTok had not released any of the messages on his account, and Instagram Meta had released some, but not all. Any parent should be concerned that they will not have the right to access details of their child's online life, even if it is suspected to have contributed to their death. Parents like Ellen are currently required to take legal action in order to pursue the release of such information. And even if you have the financial resources to do so, why should any parent be forced to go to such lengths just to find out what may be at best critical information, at worst closure? The majority of parents do not even have access to such resources. As a newly elected member, I will not stand here and pretend that the previous government got everything right. But the Online Safety Act was a crucial and positive step forward to keeping more children and young people safe online, so that fewer families have to face situations like those we've heard and spoken about today. One aspect of the Online Safety Act where this situation has been addressed is through Section 101 of the Online Safety Act, where Ofcom has the power to support a coroner's or procurator fiscal's investigation into the death of a child via the data preservation measure. This came into effect under the previous government in April last year, and it is under this section that the amendment that would be Jules' law would sit. Whilst the current iteration of Section 101 is a step in the right direction, it is not an easily accessible outcome, and it is still a solution that can only be put into effect following a tragedy. In order to prevent tragic outcomes in all too many situations, parental access to social media accounts could address this issue. And I would like to ask the Minister whether the Government has plans to introduce legislation giving parents and guardians the right to access their child's social media accounts and the messages contained within them. And if they do, would this build on existing legislation within the Online Safety Act? There are further considerations that must be taken into account. Though parental access to child's social media account may sound like a simple and prudent solution, not every child will be in a position where parental figures have that child's best interests at heart. Children who are vulnerable, for example, in a family with an abusive parent, there would also need to be safeguarding considerations. A child who may be seeking help, communicating domestic abuse to friends or organisations, may then find their only avenue of escape compromised. Further to that, there may also be instances where a parent could use their child's social media account to gain access to information about other children and teenagers via their own child's account. There are therefore wider implications about granting parents unrestricted access to the information of children other than their own, and unintentionally making unsolicited inappropriate contact easier. So I would ask the Minister to consider how such parental access rights could be designed in order to simultaneously give parents the ability to monitor their children's safety, but also to ensure children themselves have the privacy they may need to facilitate their own safety, and how such measures could be designed so as not to be exploited by any of the parties that are subject to them. I was reassured to see the Secretary of State for Science, Innovation and Technology meeting bereaved parents who have lost children after being influenced by harmful content online. I also welcome the publishing of the Secretary of State's draft Statement of Strategic Priorities for Online Safety in November last year, which provided clarity on the framework that the Government will expect the independent regulator to work within. The Secretary of State has stated that the Government will implement safety by design to stop harm occurring in the first place, and we should consider whether the expectation should fall on users themselves to take precautionary steps to avoid severely harmful content. Given how instrumental algorithms are in pushing themed content to users' feeds, I would ask the Minister what plans the Government has to give users the ability to opt out or reset these algorithms. Mr Chairman, we support parents in raising concerns about content they do not want their children to see by requiring that sites take measures to remove content as soon as it is flagged. Since the introduction of the Act, we have seen many cases where the response from platforms has been far quicker than before, and we would welcome a detailed plan on how the Government will ensure that all companies act quickly and lay out what the cost of them not doing so will be. It is right that services must assess any risks to children from using their platforms and set appropriate age restrictions, ensuring that child users have age-appropriate experiences that are shielded from harmful content such as pornography or violence, self-harm, eating disorders, or even suicide. This is why the last government tightened up age restrictions by requiring social media companies to enforce their age limits consistently and protect their child users. But many parents still believe that these age limits are too easily circumvented by children lying about their age. The Government talks of ensuring that age assurance technology to protect children is being effectively deployed. However, I would ask how the Government intends to ensure this and how it intends to ensure that companies are investing in the most up-to-date technology to facilitate this. Will the Government proactively stress test this capability, and if so, how? Mr Chairman, for all of this, Ofcom plays a vital role. As an evidence-based regulator, its task here is to regulate the trust and safety systems and processes. And whilst their role is not to police individual pieces of content necessarily, it is to ensure companies have the correct measures in place to minimise harms to users. At the end of last year, we heard how the government had informed Ofcom that they would need to build more safety measures into these systems. I would welcome the Minister to outline how the government will aid Ofcom in their aims and ensure that any government support needed will be supplied. These regulations would not be anything without empowering Ofcom to take action, which is why we gave it powers to issue fines of up to £18 million or 10% of global revenue, whichever is higher, or criminal investigations into senior managers if they fail to comply with enforcement notices. And could the Minister outline what steps the government is taking to make sure that Ofcom brings forward its children's safety codes and guidance in April? As we've all seen, technology keeps moving. Advancements are constantly made, and the risk of digital progress outstripping the pace of legislation is an all-too-real prospect. We must embrace technology and understand that the internet and social media can be a force for good, embedded in our daily lives, whilst also understanding that checks and balances are essential if we are to ensure a safe online environment for not only today's users, but those newly entering the online world. It is for the government to guarantee an environment conducive to users of all ages, but also to ensure that parents can have the confidence that the online environment can be made as safe as parents themselves strive for the home environment to be. Thank you.
I call the Minister.
Thank you, Sir Desmond. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. Can I start by paying tribute to Ellen Room for both launching this petition and for all of the campaigning she has done in this area. And I'd like to take a moment to remember her son, Jules. As a parent, I know that we do everything to keep our children safe. We teach them how to cross the road, why it matters not to talk to strangers. We do all we can. Still, it can be terrifying to think what our children are exposed to, even in the safety of our own homes. I can only imagine how it would feel not to know how or why your child lost their life. I know that parents across the country feel the same way. Ellen's petition, as we've heard, received over 120,000 signatures between 10th of May and the dissolution of Parliament on 30th of May. That shows the strength of feeling on this issue. And I'm grateful to the brave parents who continue to shine a light on this, including Ellen, Ian, and others who campaigned on this issue during the passage of the Online Safety Act. The Secretary of State has met them a number of times, and their views are absolutely crucial to the work we are doing in this area, Sir Desmond. Finally, I would like to thank the member for Sunderland Central for moving the motion on behalf of the Petition Committee to debate this e-petition, along with other honourable and right honourable members for their very powerful contributions today. I know how long it has taken to get the Online Safety Act across the line. This is not a perfect piece of legislation, and the delay in delivering it has come at a heartbreaking human cost. As the Secretary of State has set out numerous times, we are working to implement the Act as quickly as we possibly can so that the protections it puts in place can begin to change the online world our children experience. The Act has two provisions relevant to today's debate. The first section is Section 101 of the Act. It seeks to address problems faced when there is uncertainty over the circumstances leading to the death of a child. The provision supports coroners and procurators fiscal in their investigation, but given Ofcom the power to require information about a child's online activity following a request from the investigating coroner. This is already in force, and the coroners have begun to make use of the powers available to them. The second provision is Section 75 of the Act. It imposes additional duties on categorised services to be transparent with parents regarding a company's data disclosure processes following the death of a child. We have also been clear that we plan to build on the Online Safety Act where it doesn't go far enough. And the Secretary of State only yesterday set out how the Online Safety Act is uneven and in some places very unsatisfactory, and the need for Parliament to learn to legislate much, much faster. We cannot wait another 10 years to make changes to the legislation. And last year, end of last year, the Secretary of State decided to use his powers to issue a statement of strategic priorities to Ofcom, asking them to ensure that safety is embedded in our online world from the very start. This is why the government will also seek to establish a data preservation process through clause 122 of the data bill. The proposed clause will require Ofcom to issue a data preservation notice to specified companies at the request of the coroner or procurator fiscal in Scotland. This will require these companies to preserve information relating to the use of the services by the child who has died. The proposal fulfills our manifesto commitment to further strengthen powers. This will help coroners understand the tragic circumstances surrounding a child's death. On coroner sharing information with families, interested persons, including bereaved families, have the right to receive evidence from the coroners, subject to their judicial discretion. The Chief Coroner has provided detailed guidance on this. Coroners have a statutory duty to issue a prevention of future deaths report if their investigation reveals that future deaths could be prevented by one or more measures. Evidence access via Ofcom powers will help to inform a decision on whether a report should be issued. I know from parents and children just how complex this issue is. The Secretary of State visited the NSPCC recently, where he met a group of young people to understand more about their lives online. The NSPCC was concerned that given parents complete access to their children's social media accounts can raise complex issues around children's right to privacy and, in extreme cases, safeguarding issues, as we've heard today. For example, as it was raised earlier, if a child is exploring their sexuality online, they may not want their parents to know, and they would be right to expect that privacy. However, all members raised retrospective applications respect the application of Section 101. So Ofcom's powers, as I said, require information from companies on behalf of coroners. Ofcom's powers to require information from companies on behalf of coroners can still be used where a second coroner's inquest is ordered. Ofcom can use these powers on coroner's instructions. Ofcom will also be able to use data preservation notices in events that second coroner's inquest is ordered. Any personal data that is captured by the data preservation notice and held by the online service at the time of issue will still be in scope and must be retained upon receipt and notice. However, I have heard very powerfully from all members today that the costs associated and the lengths that parents have to go to actually request a second inquest. And I think, as I've said, the bill is not perfect. There is room for improvement, and I would like to meet with members and parents to explore this further. As I said, we need to continue to review the legislation. On age limits, smartphone and social media ban for under 16s has been raised, and we are aware of the ongoing debate as to what age children should have smartphones or access to social media. As the Technology Secretary has previously said, there are no current plans to implement a smartphone or social media ban for children. We will continue to do what is necessary, what is needed to keep our children safe online. We are concentrating on finding... of course.
I thank the Minister for giving way. And on that note, we've heard from several members today their concerns for children's mental health when their expectations are so often measured on heavily doctored images they see online. Will the Minister commit to use and or amend legislation which commits hosts to clearly identify doctored imagery and the accounts and pages which spread them, as is common with regulated news outlets? Thank you.
I thank the Honourable Member for his intervention. I will come to that point in my response in a second. On the smart, as I said, on the ban for smartphone social media ban for under 16s, we are currently focused on building the evidence base to inform any future action and have launched a research project looking at the links between social media and children's well-being. And I heard from the member that this needs to come forward, and I will pass that on to my colleagues in the department. My honourable friend, the member for Lowestoft, raised the issue of the private members' bill being brought forward, being proposed by the member for Whitehaven and Workington. We are aware of this private members' bill and we share his commitment to keeping children safe online. We are aware of the ongoing discussion around children's social media and smartphone use, and it is important that we give sufficient time to properly debate this issue. We are focused on implementing the Online Safety Act and building the evidence base to inform any future action. And, of course, we look forward to seeing the detail of the member's proposal, and the government will set out its position in line with the parliamentary process on that. The member for Darlington raised the issue around ambition of Ofcom. Ofcom has said that its codes will be iterative. And the Secretary of State's statement will outline clear objectives for them to require services to improve safety for their users. The member for Twickenham and the member for Bournemouth raised engagement with children. We know how important engagement with children is, and Ofcom has engaged with thousands of children when developing its codes. And the Children's Commissioner is also a statutory consultee on the codes. But of course, we must continue to do that and do more. And the member for Huntingdon raised the mental health services and our commitment on this. He is right, the government's manifesto commits to rolling out Young Futures hubs, and this national network is expected to bring local services together to deliver support for teenagers at risk of being drawn into crime, but also those who are facing mental health challenges, and where appropriate, deliver universal youth provision. I will say, as he right said, it's within the health portfolio. I would be happy to write to him with more detail of where the programme is. So, Desmond, we want to empower parents to keep their children safe online. We must also protect children's right to express themselves freely and safeguard their dignity and autonomy online. With that, I'll give the honourable member.
I'm very grateful to the Minister for giving way. I know she spoke earlier a little about age limits. I wasn't sure if she'd finished responding to members' comments and questions, and if she was going to be able to comment on the question not only of what the various age thresholds should be, but what they mean. And in particular, if having the GDPR age of 13, does that mean that parental controls effectively should be able to be switched off by somebody of age 13, 14 or 15?
I thank the honourable member for the intervention. I'm sure during the passage of the Online Safety Act, the members' party, the issue of the age limit and why it was 13 would have been discussed. But I'm more than happy to write to him in detail as to why it's been set at 13. But as I said, there are discussions. There is a live discussion being had at the moment about raising the raising the age, and evidence on that is being collated as well. As I said, Sir Desmond, the challenge of keeping our children safe is a fast-moving world. It's a fast-moving world, and is one that we all share. Government, social media platforms, parents, and society at large. As we try and find the solutions, we are committed to working together and continuing these conversations around access to data in the event of the tragic death of a child. I want to finish by thanking Ellen again for her tireless campaigning, and I want to thank all the speakers in today's debate for their thoughtful contribution. I know that you have waited a long time for change, and we have a long way to go still. Working with Ellen, the Bereaved Families for Online Safety Group, other parents and civil society organisations, we will build a better online world for our children. Thank you, Sir Desmond.
I call Lewis Atkinson to wind up.
Thank you, Sir Desmond, and I want to thank members across the House for what I think has been a very well attended and powerful debate. I think between members present, we've demonstrated significant consensus across the House about the need to continue to strengthen and evolve online regulation, which this petition shows is a significant matter of public concern. Public expect Parliament to work on a cross-party basis on these issues, I think it's fair to say, and I hope we can continue in future months the spirit that I think the debate is being conducted in today. Can I thank the Minister for her response and particularly welcome the fact that she's indicated the government will give consideration to any changes that may be in the forthcoming data bill, potentially to put beyond doubt that in historic cases such as Jules's, that parents do have rights to access data following bereavements, and that the powers have been set out to coroners can be applied without undue financial work, penalty or campaigning for parents like Ellen. Of course, the people that we haven't heard from today are the social media companies, though I'm sure they're listening to us all. And I would just, in concluding, invite them to demonstrate that they genuinely want to do the right thing. Get in touch. Do the right thing for bereaved parents like Ellen. Don't hide behind data protection regulations. Actively engage with policymakers and families to get this right, to allow children to be protected, and to give, in tragic cases when a child has died, to give parents the opportunity to grieve properly. I want to thank the Petitions Committee staff for their assistance in organising and preparing this debate, which it has been an honour to lead. But it's right that the final words of the debate are for me to pay tribute to the 126,000 petitioners, and in particular to Ellen Roon. May Jules's memory always be a blessing, and I sincerely hope that today's debate helps you and other bereaved families get the data and the answers that you need. Thank you, sir.
The question is that this House has considered e-petition 661,407 relating to children's social media accounts. Those that are of that opinion will say aye. 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 Of the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. The sitting stands adjourned.